Hello everyone and welcome back to Angie B Cards and Crafts. So today I'm going to be working with a few different products of mixed media styling. So I'm just going to run through the different products I'm going to be using and then get on with making a page in my journal. So I'm using several different brands of sprays here, and it's just an opportunity to show you that you don't have to stick to one brand. They do all work together, and it's just about trying them and seeing what you like. You don't have to always use just one type and stick to that and not put anything else in. So the ones I'm using today are Dina Wakley gloss sprays. Now I've got a few of these now, and most of them have got the magic ball in them. That means you need to shake them up, but for some reason my marine one has no ball. I don't know why. I have taken the lid off and had a poke around to see if I can find it, and there just isn't one in there. I don't know whether I can add one in, but I like it too much to not use it. So I've got a few different colours in that. And the gloss sprays are a form of acrylic. They're a shiny acrylic. So they're different to other sprays. They are a plastic in a bottle effectively. So they do stick to things. What I would say is if you're precious about the surface you're working on, cover it thoroughly. This mat has been scraped this morning, the glass mat, just to get the spray off from yesterday, and there's still bits on and it will need to be scraped again after this. And my surrounding desk is now a different colour to what it was. But I'm not bothered by that because I'm just very messy when it comes to crafting at any rate. So they're brilliant. I've only recently gotten to grips with them and I really do rather like them. Right, so the next sprays that I'm going to be using are Holtz Distress Oxide Sprays from Ranger. These are ones that you may well have seen me use before. You can see in the bottom of here, maybe you can't, let me see if I can show you in this one better, I think, that there is actually a layer here of the powder in the bottom, the oxidizing bit. So again, it has a magic ball in it, so you need to shake it. Now what you have to bear in mind when you're shaking any product that requires it is that inside the product there is a tube. If you shake it, there is a possibility that the product that sits at the bottom is going to go up the tube. If that does happen, don't panic. If you just take it out like that, take the lid off and spray it, it shoots out the bottom. If that fails, then you can run it through some warm water. When it does come to shaking these, you'll notice that I try and remember to put something over the top. So I take the lid off and put something over the top of this. If you don't, then the ink or the paint tends to come up at the side here and it gets very messy in the cap. You can see I've done it a few times where I've not done so in that cap. And then the third spray that I'm going to use today is an Izink dye spray by Seth Apter. I'm using this quite a bit. I've not had it a terribly long time, but I'm already about a third of the way down the bottle. It is my current favourite when it comes to brown sprays. I just really like the tone of brown it is. I like the way it dries. I like the variation in the depth of colour. If you spray it more, you do get a much richer colour. I'm also going to be using a Stays On ink pad, and I've forgotten to get out my VersaFine Clair ink pad, both in black. I'm going to be using, this is Dreamweaver stencil paste that I've acquired, and I'm not bothered the fact that it's black. I'm not choosing it because it's black. I'm choosing it just because it's a lightweight, simple to use product to use with stencils. I'm going to be painting over it with the sprays, so it doesn't matter. And then we're going to be doing some highlighting using Pebeo Gilding Wax. And I think I've said before, this is one that I've had a long time, probably about 5 years, and there's hardly any gone out of it. So even though I do use it quite a lot. So they're the products that we're using. Oh, I'll also be using glue. And then I'm going to be using stencils and stamps. So if I move these out of the way, I'll show you what else we've got. So the stencil that I'm going to be using is this one, which goes that way around. It's a really handy one, this. You can tell which way around it's meant to go without having to look too carefully at the cutter because it's got a clock on it. So as long as you know your Roman numerals, you can tell which way it's going to go. I absolutely love this stencil. it's got Linnell Harlow written on it, but I think, I wouldn't swear to it, but I think it is a Sweet Poppy stencil. Just because it's made of metal, and most of the ones that I've got that are made of metal are Sweet Poppy ones. So I'm assuming that one is. I've also got a couple of stamps by Andy Skinner from Creative Expressions. So I've got the cracked up one, which is a decent sized stamp, and just looks like cracked paint. And I've also got the smashed glass one, which, as you can see, it just looks like a bullet has gone through the glass. Again, a decent sized stamp. So they're the two that I'm potentially going to use. So we're going to start off in my Pink Pig journal. Yes, it is Pink Pig, I was just checking. Now, these Pink Pig journals I love. I have probably got about 15 of them now in different sizes. Some of them are the 4x4, they're the smallest ones that I've got in the Pink Pig ones. And I have just acquired, let me just pull it over and show you. I haven't started working in it yet, but this is my new baby from Pink Pig, which is a 12x12 stencil, 12x12 journal, and I'm so looking forward to starting in that one. So I've gone for my black journal this time. Just let me find the page. That's the page we're working on. Okay, and the reason I've gone for black is that it just gives a different undertone to the work that you're doing. If you use white, it brightens everything up. If you use black, it tones everything down. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually use the Distress Oxides. And this is just to put an underlayer on. Now I've got my raggy, which is an old tea towel. Now this is a nice, fresh, clean raggy. It even smells of drying outside on the washing line. So I've just covered over that. I'll just show you if I don't come, oh, it's not going to come out, but I would recommend always do this. I have had a few that I've forgotten to do that with, and I've ended up splattering all over. Okay, something I'm really, really good at as well is mixing up my lids, which doesn't sound like a problem until you start getting, so I put this lid on to this is brown, this is yellow, and then you get a little bit on. You might, if you want a really brown project, you might get a hint of yellow or vice versa. So I try not to mix them up, but I'm really not very good at not mixing them up. So the two colours I'm using are Fossilized Amber, which is a lovely yellow. I have this in the Distress Oxide Spray, the Distress Oxide and the Distress Ink. It is a colour that I love, and I also have the Vintage Photo, which is the other colour, in all three. But for today, I'm just sticking with the sprays. I'm going to pop my raggy, because I spray with my right hand, I'm popping my raggy over the stuff on my left, just to stop them getting totally covered. Okay. Now what you can do, I'm going to be really good and do this actually. It's something that I don't often do. But you can actually take a piece of card or a piece of paper and just pop it underneath. As long as it's bigger, you can use newspaper, magazines, just a piece of backing card, whatever you want. And all this is doing is meaning that the pages underneath aren't going to get ruined by whatever I put on this page, which is a good habit to get into, because it is frustrating when you suddenly look at a page and go, that's not how it looked when I did it. So I'm putting quite a lot of ink on. And then what I'm going to do is use water. So if you haven't used Distress Oxide Sprays before, they have this unique response if you spray water on them. If I was just to leave this like this, it would dull down a little bit, because once the fluid is gone, it's a much duller colour. But when I start spraying, you'll see that it changes, it becomes more chalky looking. And that is the unique thing about the Distress Oxide. I'm quite wanting a little bit more yellow. And what you need to remember about Distress Oxides as well is if you spray on them when they're wet, they will mix. If you spray on them when they're dry, they will sit on top of each other. So if you don't want to get a big pool of mud, then you need to dry off in between. I tend to use this heat gun just because it disperses the heat. It means that you're not overheating the page, and I also try to heat from in front and behind just to try and get the page a little bit flatter. It's also useful, once it's stopped running quite as much, to lift the page up so that you're not heating the underneath. You're just heating the one page. Okay. So these heat guns are the same temperature as your embossing heat guns. They've got the same level of power, it's just more dispersed. And I'm seeing some blobbing here. Oops, knocking the glue over. Stand it up that way, Angela, that's a good plan. I'm just going to move this out because I don't want the page underneath to get ruined by that blob. And it's something else worth considering is what is on the page below, because I know that I'll flick over and show you. On the page below, I've got some nice bright things. I don't really want them getting covered in the browns and the yellows of this. So that's why I'm just wanting to make sure it doesn't run off the edges onto the page behind. You can see that this is getting very chalky looking. It's an effect that I really like. Some people don't like it. Some people get very concerned talking about whether or not you need to seal it. I'm just removing some of these puddles to speed up the drying process. Sorry, the dry air from the heat guns making me cough a little. So it depends on what look you're going for and what your preference is. Every crafter, every artist has their own preference as to what they like and dislike in any piece that they're doing. And just think about what do you personally like. Don't go off what someone dictates you should or shouldn't have. Choose something that you actually like to do. Right, I'm going to put some more yellow on here because I don't think there's enough yellow. And spray with a little bit more water. And just get it to run a little bit. So you can see it's picking up some of the brown as well, but the brown's starting to show through. Now I'm not overly worried about this. This is just a background layer. This isn't a vital layer, but what you find when you're making things is that if you add layer upon layer upon layer, you're adding a layer of interest upon a layer of interest. And when someone looks at your work, they can tell if you've just put one layer of something on, or several different layers, one on top of the other. And personally, I like the look of that varying level of interest and the way that it makes the piece look slightly different as you progress. Sorry, this heat gun's really tickling. I think it's because of the heat outside as well. Right, so that is pretty much dry. Just give it a blast underneath. Okay, so on top of that, what I'm going to do now is a little bit of stamping. Okay, so I'm in a bit of chaos today around my craft room. I've done a really good job of leaving everything very messy, apart from the bits straight underneath the camera, so everything is falling over. So I apologise for that if you hear things falling, it's just bits of paper and card falling everywhere. Right, next thing I'm going to do is the stamping, and for that I need stamps and ink. So I showed you the stamps I've got, so this is the cracked up and this is the smashed glass. And I'm not going to put them onto a stamp block. All I'm wanting to do with this is, so I've not given myself enough space at all, is actually use the stamp, and I'm going to use it with VersaFine Clear ink. I'm going to use it in my hand just to add little bits of interest. Again, there's no rules about this. You can stamp and do second generation stamps and do off the page stamps. This is just another layer to make what you're working on more interesting to the people who are looking at it. So, get rid of some of that ink from the middle. There we go. Now, I don't know whether I want to use the smashed glass one. I might just leave it. I'll put a couple on. So this one, I prefer personally the smaller circles. rather than these 3 larger ones. I like this end. So most of the time when I use this, I do just use the smaller end. I use both, but most of the time it is the smaller end, because then I think you get more on your page. And again, it's just adding a layer, not even re-stamped on this one, it's just putting down something a little bit different. I think that'll do. One more over here maybe. There we go. These stamps are really nice stamps. As I said, they're from Creative Expressions, but they're designed by Andy Skinner. Andy Skinner was actually the very first demonstrator that I saw. Useless piece of information there. And I saw him at a craft shop in Preston many moons ago. I'm just going to do a quick clean up of my mat. I try and remember to do this bit in between, just to stop ink getting where I don't want it to be. Okay. Right. So I'm going to give these a quick blast. With the VersaFine Clay, I always say it's got a good open time. That means it stays wetter for longer. So if you're having to, or if you're wanting to do something like emboss, it's brilliant. But if you're wanting it to dry in, it doesn't, although it gives a really good print for very fine detail, which is why I've used it with these stamps, because they've got the very fine detail, it takes longer to dry. If you've got something between the ink and the surface, the paper surface, or whatever other medium, it's going to take even longer. So because there's a layer of ink in between, it's going to take a little bit longer. So what I do is I'll give it a quick waft with the heat gun, and then I'm going to use a piece of paper to blot it, or a piece of card to blot it, just to get off any excess ink. Okay? And it's useful to get into the habit of just drying each layer. They don't have to be bone dry, but personally I like them to be dry in between. The only time I'm not bothered about them being dry in between as much is when I'm using the gel press. So I'm just going to use the piece that I was leaning on earlier, just to see if there's anything there. So there's a little bit there, you can see some little bits of black ink coming off, but that's fine, there's nothing major there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is open this up. Just realised I've forgotten to move that out of the way, that's why I'm struggling with space. My iPad was just out of camera shot, I'd forgotten to shift it. Okay, so I've got some washi tape here, and all I'm going to do with that is use it to hold my stencil down. And again, you can use washi tape, you can use masking tape. There's the purple masking tape, there's crafter's tape that I've never used but I have seen used and I believe is very good. This is, I don't even know where this washi tape's from, it's probably from Amazon or somewhere like that, or one that I picked up because I happened to see in a craft shop as I walked past and the colours caught my eye. I tend to go over the edge a little bit onto the mat just to stop the whole thing from moving too much while I'm trying to put the stencil paste through. Now I'm sure if you watch the staff who work with the Sweet Poppy stencils, they're much neater and much more specific in how they do this. Stenciling to me is something to add texture, it's not something to add as it's an adding of more interest, so I'm really not worried if it's not a perfect image. This stuff is really light, it's almost oh, what would you describe it? It's almost like if anyone's ever had fluff, it's like aerated. It's not a thick heavy paste, it's not like if you got a sandy paste, and it's not like a gel medium. As I say, the only reason it's black is because that's the one that I happen to have. It's not because I want the colour black. I'm quite enjoying using this. It is different from what I normally use. Normally I would use a sand-based stencil product, modelling paste or something like that. But I'm quite liking this one. What I would say with any stencils that you use, just be conscious of cleaning them. It's really, really important to clean them afterwards, because they just, the stuff sticks to them. It's designed to get hard. You don't want it getting hard on your stencil if you can avoid it. So still a few little areas. Best thing to consider when you're doing stenciling as well is don't over egg it. Don't use it. Don't keep putting the stuff through it again and again. If there's a little area that you notice, that's fine, but don't repeatedly go over it. So there's a little area there that's just missed. There we go. And then take off as much as you can and pop it back in the jar. There's no point in wasting it. Right, so that's the lid back on that. Give this a wipe on my ragget so I don't get black gunk everywhere, which I no doubt will as it falls off. Okay. Now what can sometimes happen with this, which has happened a little bit there, is it can sometimes just take a little bit of your page. As I say, it is washi tape, so it's not designed to be used as stencil tape. But if you're gentle taking it off, and again, personally on this black card in this journal, it doesn't bother me. If I was making a card for someone, I wouldn't be using this because I'd be more bothered about whether or not it ripped the card. But on this, I actually think these little bits that are coming off are actually adding a little bit more texture. But it's personal preference. If you want to be more careful, you can be. You can use masking tape that's designed to lift off more easily. So if I lift this off, and there we have the beautiful image. I do absolutely love this image. I just think it's really interesting. It's very steampunk in that it's got a lot of imagination. Oops, try not to do something like that, but it's not caused a lot of problem. So you can see you've got the clock, and then it's the mechanisms behind the clocks. You've got springs and cogs and pipes and taps, and I just love it. So this is quite lightweight, so when you dry it, it dries a lot quicker. So I'm just going to give it a blast, because we want it dry before we put anything on top of it. What can happen if you hold it still in one place, I'll just show you, it bubbles up a little bit. So you can see it's starting to bubble up here. If that's the look you're going for, that's fine. If not, then keep moving it around. You may well see some kind of smokiness coming off. That's just the different things within the various layers lifting off because of the heat of the heat gun. Don't panic about it. Just see, yeah, we're pretty much dry. It almost feels a little bit like funky foam when it's dried, this one. It's got a squishiness to it. Again, I quite like it. Like I say, it's something I've only used a few times now, but I'm quite liking it. So I'm just bending my page a little bit there. It's actually quite dry. Oh, there's a little bit of moisture there. Let's just get rid of that. Don't want to ruin the image underneath. Okay. Right. So we're now going to move on. Just move my gloss sprays over because I need them within reach, and I need to cover the stuff on my left again to stop the gloss sprays from ruining it. Yeah, I've got things like a Distress Oxide pads on a Lazy Susan over here, and my paper stash and things. I really don't want to get them covered in various different inks. Right, I'm going to grab another raggy, since that one's now in use, and cover over the tops of these before I spray them. I am absolutely loving using these. I think they're brilliant. I've only got, I think, about half a dozen of the colours so far, and the aim is to get a lot more of them. Now, sprays may not be your thing. I know some people like to be more in control of where their colour lands. I like the interest that you get of not knowing I think it makes life much more exciting not to actually know what you're going to get. So you can see they're actually overlaying on each other quite nicely. I'm liking the look of that, but I want to put some blue in. I'm just going to dry it off a little bit so that I can then pop some blue on. There's some nice mixing going on at this side with a little runoff as well. One of the reasons that I really enjoy working in an art journal is that you can just play to your heart's content. You can do whatever you want in it. It's your space. So it doesn't matter whether it's good, bad or indifferent, as long as you're enjoying it. And it's about your learning experience and developing your own skills. And plus you can express yourselves in art journals, and that's something else that I really like, is the ability to just express how I'm feeling. If I'm having a rubbishy day, then I can go and do something in my art journal that can cheer me up because I use bright colours or because I actually use dark, miserable colours and express myself in that way. I'm just wiping this up a little bit to make sure it doesn't go on the page below as everything moves. There we go. Cover up with the raggy again. There we go. Right, I'm going to use the marine. The colours that I've already used are lemon, lime and eggplant, and I'm now going to use the marine, which is a really nice deep turquoise. Quite liking the way this is looking. Okay, right, I'm going to pop that to one side now and we will come back to it, because the other thing that we're going to use today is some cogs. Now I've got a few cogs. I've got some that I've used in other projects that I've just brought in as well. Now the cogs that I'm using are just cut using a Tim Holtz cog die. So this is one that these ones I've sprayed with Distress Oxide Sprays. These ones have had the Seth Apter spray, some Distress Oxide spray and some Gilding Wax. There might even be a bit of gloss spray on them. So they may come in. I'm not sure which I'm going to use yet, so I'll just pop them off at the top. And then we have these ones. Now what I've been doing and what I'm going to carry on doing now is using this piece of paper. And I've used this for the last few days just as a base to spray things onto. And the reason that I'm using it is because I think it's adding lots of texture and colour and giving me a really good background for something else, for another piece of work. So you can see here there's some words, there's a spanner shape, there's some big screw shapes which I'll show you what they're off. I've been spraying this little spanner, I've been spraying some screws and some cogs. So whatever you put down you can use it as a stencil or a mask, and it just makes a little bit more interest. So I'll spread these around a little bit. And I've decided with these ones this time I'm going to spray them with the gloss sprays. So I'm going to use some of the brighter colours, a little bit of yellow. So it's going to have two effects. One is it's going to colour the cogs, and the other is that it's actually going to colour the oh, I've just realised I've got my lids mixed up, never mind. It's going to colour the background and add a little bit more interest. I love the way these two colours mix, the red and the yellow together, or the pink and the yellow. What you'll find is each nozzle is its own individual thing as well. So some nozzles you'll get a really good central spray. Try and get into the habit of just giving the nozzle a wipe as you finish using it, and that helps in keeping it clear enough to get less squirting up onto your work. Right, where are you off? Oh, you're off there then. Right, okay, that makes sense now. Sorry, I'm just getting my lids mixed up. Okay, so we've got those. I'm going to give them a blast. One thing to be aware of when you're doing this is they're really, really good at sticking because of the gloss spray. So I always have a pokey tool to hand. This is a tonic pokey tool. It's a Tim Holtz one. I think the reason it's Tim Holtz is because it's black, because it's exactly the same as the first one I got that was a tonic one that was pink, apart from the fact it's black. So just blasting these a little bit, but then being aware that they may well start to stick. So just move them away from where they've been sprayed as you go along so they don't stick. I can see that one's beginning to stick. There we go. Just move them over slightly. And again, it's just another area of colour as you move them through. Now I've no plans as to what I'm going to do with this piece of paper that I'm colouring them on at the minute. Get off. Oh, that one's being stubborn. There we go. But I just really like the depth of colour that I'm getting of using, and this isn't just the gloss sprays. This is a whole host of different sprays. So there's gloss sprays, there's oxides, there's the Seth Apter one. The only Seth Apter colour I currently have is the brown, and it's on my list to buy more. But unfortunately, finances don't permit you to buy just because you fancy them. You have to wait until you have the funds. And if we all got everything we wanted in the crafty world, well, I would need a much, much bigger room because I wouldn't have enough space. I'm just dabbing up some of these so that things don't continue to stick. I'm just going to pop these back into the middle. Some of them have stuck because what's happened is it's gone through a little bit. And just remember that the gloss sprays are effectively plastic in a spray bottle. It's an acrylic. So just be aware of that when you're working with it. But I really like the gloss effect. You can see it more on this paper, but you've got the lovely gloss effect. So now, to make these more coggy, I'm going to use the dye spray from Izink. This doesn't have a magic ball in it. This doesn't have shiny bits in it. You don't have to worry about mixing this one up. I'm sorry, my dog has just decided he's going to start barking, so if you hear him in the background, I do apologise. It's got to that time of day where he now barks until he gets fed. He's nearly 18. He's a little Jack Russell. Oh, we've missed one there. But what we can do with that is just pop it upside down into the ink and we get the colour on it. So yeah, he's an 18-year-old Jack Russell. He's pretty deaf, almost blind. His back legs don't work as well as they once did. And he forgets that he's eaten anything. So he spends a lot of his time barking for food. And he doesn't go out a lot these days because he can't. His back end just collapses. On a good day he can walk around the village. But he is lovely. He's a smelly old man who gets us up through the night because he needs to go out for a wee. He'll bark for food, but he never ever barks to go out. So sometimes you just go, oh, where's the dog? And he's standing at the back door silently with his legs crossed, which can be interesting. Oh, I've missed one here. There we go, let's lift you out as well. Oh. Get off. There we go. So I've got way too many here for this project, but I tend to do batches like this just so that I've got them ready, so that when I do need them, it's really easy to just pick them up and use them. And again, as with any of the inks, if you feel you've got too much on, you can just very easily go in and dab. Just remember, as I say, with these being acrylics, if you dab them, you may well have already developed a skin on them. Obviously the top layer isn't an acrylic, but this is just adding the different layers together. So I'm not going to worry about that. That can dry of its own accord. And I will move these off onto my mat. I love the way the different layers of cogs start to develop on this piece of paper. So you can see there's a few different layers at various times that I've done over the last, I think I've had this 2 days, this one. I've got another piece here, which is a blue piece that I was working on as well. So this one had some texture paste on it as well, and then I sprayed onto it. So it's just a really good way of getting some extra backing. So what we're going to do with these, I'm just going to give an extra blast on these actually. Some of them still feel a little bit too wet. But we're going to add these on to our clock. And while we've got the heat gun here, we'll bring the clock back in and make sure it's dry enough. And I think it is, but you can see that's got a lovely, lovely sheen to it with the acrylic spray, but you've still got texture having used the paste, which is really nice. So what we're going to do now is decide where these are going to go. It doesn't matter what angle you have your book at, but it's sometimes helpful to have it the way you're going to look at it. So that one roughly fits there. I quite like that one there. That one, oh, that one fits there quite nicely. I think that one's okay there. Don't like that one as much. Oh, that one's nice and colourful. We'll have that one there. And I think we'll pop that one there as if it's covering over. Quite like where they are. Oh, we've got another one there that we could add on. That one's a bit small. Oh yeah, that one there. Okay, what I'm going to do is get my scissors, which are here, and I am going to chop these ones down before I stick them on, just so that I'm happy with how they look, because I don't want them to be all overlapping onto the clock face. So again, it's not perfection that we're looking for, it's making it work on the piece. If you are more of a perfectionist than me, that's fine. You work the way you work. And I would never ever criticise somebody else's methodology, because everyone is different. Now, the reason that I craft is because I get enjoyment from it. I've spent many years working in the NHS and then privately, and crafting has, for the last, it must be 25 years now, been my go-to escape, with varying levels of intensity throughout that time. And I suppose I've been really lucky in lockdown. Unlucky in that my work that I did prior to lockdown was all in schools, and I had to be invited in by the schools to work with children. So once the schools shut, my work dried up. But lucky in that that's now given me an opportunity to further develop what I want to develop in the crafting side of things. And what I've noticed here is there's a little bit of a skin there, and that's going to have come from the acrylic paint. Personally, I actually quite like it, because it's almost, I don't know if you can see that, it almost looks like a spider's web across the cog. So I'm going to see if that will survive the gluing process, because I think it looks quite nice. So yeah, lockdown for me has given me an opportunity to actually develop this side of things and do more of my crafting and artwork, which I've really appreciated. And the other thing is, it's actually helped me maintain my sanity through lockdown, because I've had an escape. Now, this is just PVA glue, so if it does come through, it will just come off. I don't know if anyone else is like me, but I quite often will put the glue on the back of my hand for more complex shapes, smaller shapes, and then I leave it to set, and then I peel it all off, and it's great. This glue doesn't work quite as well in that it doesn't come off as a solid sheet from the back of your hand, but this glue is really good for making glue skins. I don't know if any of you have tried making the glue skins, but it's quite a nice way of, again, getting more texture in, is to actually make a skin but adding in different colours using either inks or mica powders or paints, and then you spread your glue with a palette knife and you spread it onto a mat, onto like a brown mat, heat resistant mat, that's the phrase I was looking for, and then pop it to one side, and then when you come back the next day it's formed a lovely skin which you can then peel off and use. What I have discovered is it can be troublesome to peel it off sometimes. Sometimes it sticks to itself, so you have to be patient, but I like the effect of it. And again, it just adds more interest. It takes some inks quite well. If you actually sort of once you put it on your project, you can add inks to it, but what you can also do is mix the inks into it, which gives some really nice colours. It's not just a clear then. All I'm doing here with my pokey tool is the glue had covered the holes, so I'm just opening the holes back up again, like so. Okay, right, so I'm going to let that dry off. As I said, we've not used all of those, we'll just pop those off the edge with the others. And we'll give this a quick wipe before we do the next bit, just to get rid of the glue. Okay, so we have got some gloss spray on here. You can see there's a layer here. So what I'll do is just get my scalpel to get that off. I'll just use a scalpel blade and I just run it along, and you can see it comes off like that. It's a really useful way of cleaning it up, I find. And then I tend to just get a single sheet of toilet paper and wipe it off like that. So that's what I'll be doing to clean up my mat afterwards. Right, so the other thing that we're going to use on this is 1, 2 or 3 of these. I don't know which yet, I've not decided, but I'm going to prep them all. So these are dies that I have cut. They are Tim Holtz dies. I think this range is called Lost and Found. Just bear with me while I find Lost and Found the irony. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I think it's just called Lost and Found. But that's the set that it comes in. It's a set from Sizzix. They're Thinlit dies. They're from Tim Holtz Alterations range. And I just think they're really cool because obviously, as you can see, they cut into the card. So what you can do is you can actually cut them into a piece of card or into a page in your journal to show what's underneath. It's up to you. But what I like to do is cut them out like this onto plain card and then distress them up a little bit. So to do that, I tear the edges, which if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know I'm a fan of tearing edges. But I'm just going to run through again the difference in tearing edges. So whichever side you tear towards you will leave behind the raw edge. So if I want this to have a raw edge, I'll hold the side nearest to where the die cut is and tear it towards me. And you can see we now have a raw edge here, and on this one we still have the paper on top, the smooth layer. So just when you're about to tear something, figure out which way you want it to look. Do that one. I've not left myself a great deal of space at the ends of these, so I need to just try and take off a little skinny bit. I've recently gotten a little, oh, what's it called? Spellbinders. Don't know what it's called. This little die cutting machine, like a desktop one, and it's great because it just means that I can cut dies like this without having to get my big machine out or to go over and get my Gemini out and things like that. So it's actually a really, really nice machine to have just for little dies. So I'm finding that it sits in one of my trolleys very near me, and I just plonk it out onto the desk when I need it. So ideally you wouldn't have left such a small gap at the end, but I'd obviously trying to use up a little piece of card that wasn't quite long enough for that. So that's with the raw edge on top. So on this one I'm going to do it so that it's the raw edge behind. So I'm going to flip it over and then tear towards me. So you can see now the raw edge is on the scrap piece of paper. So flip it over and tear it towards me. And then I've done the same here. I've obviously been just trying to use up little bits of paper, or card I should say. This that I'm using is Pink Frog Super Smooth. It's kind of my go-to card at the minute. It's 300 GSM, super smooth. They regularly have really good deals on it on Hochanda. So it's worth keeping an eye out. I wouldn't suggest that you get it at full price because they do bring it down so often. Just keep an eye out. Sometimes it's happy hour deals. Sometimes it's on 7-day savers. I think my last lot I got because they had an anniversary show. I think they've done a couple of years with Hochanda. So we've got all these torn, and I think I'm going to go for the Lost and Found because I think the numbers is going to be a little bit too big because it's going to go across or down the side. I don't know, let's have a look. Yeah, I like that. We'll go with the Lost and Found. So we need to colour these up. So now you can colour these up any way you like. I'm going to bring in one of my sheets. We'll go on the blue one this time because the other one's still got some puddles drying on it. Pop these in. You have got the option, if you want to, which I think I might do actually, is to add a little bit of texture to it. So to add texture, you can use whatever you've got. This is Pebeo modelling paste, high density, and there's not a lot left in the pot, but I quite like it because it's quite easy to use, but it's just like a sandy feeling to it. So to use this on here, I'm literally just going to dab it on with my finger, if you don't mind moving out of the way, thanks ever so. And it's just to add a little bit of additional texture. So you don't have to cover it all, and you can add it as thickly or as finely as you want to. But it just means when you add additional texture that your ink isn't going to be as flat when you put it on, and you might find it pools in different ways. It reacts to the light in a different way because of the additional texture. Alright, I've forgotten to bring myself a drink of water, which isn't the best plan when you're about to do a video, but never mind. Right, so we've got that. Again, we've only put a thin layer on, so it's not going to take long to blast it. I've just ordered, off Hochanda funnily enough, oh, what make was it? Golden, some golden pastes they had the other day on a show. It was Lou Withers that was doing it, and it was looking at, you could get a trial pack of their different products, different modelling paste products. So I thought I'd give them a go. It was, you only get a little tube of each, but it's worth trying. And I did that with the Tim Holtz one as well. You can get the little trial pots of it, and it's a really nice way of doing it because you can then choose which ones you like. So they're dry enough. In fact, I'll keep that in there because we're going to spray them now. I'm going to spray them to start with. No, that's the wrong one, Angela. Where have you put it? There it is. With the brown ink. So one thing that you can do with these before you put them on a project, if you want to, is use them as stencils. Because if I show you what this looks like now underneath, you can actually use it really nicely as a stencil before you start adding it to your project. And you can build up several layers of colour in doing that. So I've stuck a little bit of brown on there. You can see as I'm drying it, just make sure that's high enough for you to see. It's actually going quite a lot paler as you dry it off, which is fine. But if I then give it another blast, just get the ink again, and give it another blast. So you get a lot more intensity to the colour second time around. Just move it out of the way there and there. This is why I've got permanently coloured fingernails. I never wear nail varnish, but I always have. I look like I've come from down the pit, the colour of my fingernails. Play a game most tea times of what colours have I been working with any day. So you can see that's much darker now, and you get more multi-tonal colour in, because it's got two layers on, but the layers aren't going to be identically on top of each other. So some areas are going to have paler areas than others. And plus, because I've just put a touch of the modelling paste on, there's thicker and thinner areas, and some areas haven't got it on at all, so the ink's gone directly onto the paper. So you just get little additional bits of texture, which is really helpful. Now, to make these stand out on your project a little bit, it is useful to use a little bit of black ink around the edges. I'm just using a Stays On ink pad, the black one. This is the small one. My big one disappeared a long time ago. But this small one is really helpful for doing around edges. And what I tend to do as well is just bring it in over the top, just to add again some more interest and depth. You don't have to spend forever doing this. It's not an exact science. It's just about letting people look at it and wonder how you've achieved it. It's actually quite easy to achieve, but people would be looking at it and thinking, is that metal? Is that wood? How have they achieved that colouring? Is it salvaged? Is it an old metal sign? I absolutely love these because they do look a little bit like old metal signs. Right, where did I put that lid? There it is. So, we're nearly done. So these are going to sit onto this, but I just want to give them a little bit more interest. I'm just checking all these have stuck down. Yes, they've stuck down nicely. So to give this a little bit more interest, that's when the gilding wax comes into play. Now, gilding wax, number one, it smells lovely. I do love the smell of it. I wouldn't recommend sniffing it, but I do love the smell of it. It lasts a long time. It's quite soft, the one that I use. It's Pebeo. I seem to be on Pebeo products today. Excuse me. It's not a mousse. It's like a thick moisturiser, I suppose. And I tend to put it on my finger and then put it onto the mat and then just start adding hints of it. I don't want it everywhere. It's just a hint. And then if you find your patch is starting to dry out, which this one actually isn't, what you can do is just put a little bit more out. What I wouldn't suggest is going straight into the jar. So now my finger's nearly dry, so I'm just doing a really light layer over the whole thing. But I wouldn't suggest going straight into the jar. If I get another piece, I'll use one of these cogs and show you. So if I do one half, touching the finger in and then touching it onto the mat, you get quite a light layer. But if I then go straight into the jar and then straight onto there, so it depends what look you're going for. You get a completely different look. It gives you complete coverage. If that's what you're going for, that's fine. Personally, I always rub a bit off first. So we've got that for going on the lost and found, but I also want a little bit of more sheeny, shiny bits onto here. So again, why have I put the lid on that? I'm going to be using my gilding wax again. Just put a little bit down. Again, gilding wax will dry onto your mat, so don't be surprised if it does. What I would say to you is let it dry and then either give it a good scrub. Sometimes a baby wipe is enough, or what I will quite often do is use a blade on it again, the same way as I do with the paints. It's just really nice for getting it off. So that's just adding some little bits. Hopefully you can see the sun's decided to come in this window now, so I don't know if you can see that very clearly. I'll give you as many angles as I can. It does wash off your finger eventually, but not necessarily first time round. If you don't like getting mucky, it doesn't mean you have to avoid this type of crafting. You can choose to just wear gloves or get some, oh, what's that stuff called? Swafega, is it? I think it is. That gets pretty much everything off. So I'm now going to stick my Lost and Found on. I do quite like this glue, but one thing that I do find is it's quite hard to squeeze out of the bottle. And I don't have the strongest of grips to do it. The pen glue that you get from Tonic comes out beautifully. I'll show you the one I mean. This one. This comes out beautifully, but it's not as strong. This is just an ordinary PVA. This one is a tacky glue, so it's stickier. So I do try and store this upside down so it comes out a little bit easier. Once it's in this part, you can usually get it out reasonably easy. Right, so there's quite a few areas there that are quite fine. So I'm just going to use my finger. Again, don't be afraid to get your hands involved, because it just means that you can actually get it to look how you want it to. There we go. Make that stick. Now, finishing touches for me for this would be just a simple black Posca pen. If you've never used a Posca pen, it's an acrylic paint in pen form. It has a magic ball in it, so you have to give it a shake. It does separate out. Excuse me, if you don't give it a shake, you can find it just comes out a little bit too runny. If you're finding it's coming out too runny, the nib, I'll show you with this, the nib just comes in and out like that. Okay, so if you're finding it's too runny when it comes out, you just press the nib in and the paint comes out. Okay, so I'm just going to dab that off on there and mop it up. So I don't actually want to put my hand in a big blob of black paint. There we go. So I'm just very simply going to go around the edge of my page, and it's just framing it. It just finishes off a project. If this was a piece of artwork on a canvas, I would simply edge the canvas rather than necessarily edging the piece. But within my art journal, I would always add a little bit of an edged piece, edge to the piece even. Okay, so that's the finished piece. I hope you've enjoyed watching that and found some useful hints and tips to use in your own crafting world. Give me a thumbs up, like it on YouTube, pop over, if you're watching this on YouTube, pop over to me on Facebook, Angie B Cards and Crafts, or Angie Mary B on Instagram, and hopefully I will see you all soon. Bye, thanks for watching.